Hello, folks. Dustin Zarni here, Democratic Elections Commissioner for Onondaga County. Welcome to Commissioner in a Car. I'm going to turn those off because it's kind of weird glare. Today is Monday, January 19th, 2026. It is Martin Luther King Day. And I usually do this on Sundays, but I decided to hold off and do it on Monday because I wanted to pay tribute to Martin Luther King Jr., who is a hero of mine, a hero of many people, but especially those of us who have dedicated our life to voting. Martin Luther King Jr. has a special place. And I also think his story is something that can be talked about, and the way he took on power is a very good lesson for us here in this moment that we are in early 2026, and still fighting some of these battles today. I will do that'll be my special segment in the middle of the podcast, so hold on for that. I'm going to do something a little different than I normally do. I put together some quotes, and I put together some highlights of what I believe is, one of the important parts of MLK Jr.'s story to me. But he means so much to so many different people, and I can't express what he means to others, but I can only express what he means to me, and I wanted to do that today. But I will follow some of my Commissioner in the Car formatting. Last week at the Board of Elections was our first week in the office, where all the senior staff was there. Many of us were on vacations, and then we had our NYSECA conference. So this last week was the first week that we were all in the office. And, we're still very caught up with registration. I think we are doing it daily. If something comes in, we will have it done within 2 or 3 days. So it is, the staff is doing a great job at that. We're now starting to work on, we have our first reorganizational meeting at the end of January. This is where we set our policies for all of our, for all of the year, really. We have like about 12 or 13 different policies that we're looking over to see if there's any changes that we want to make. If not, that we will, move on and readopt many of them when we are doing that now. And we're getting ready for ballot, access for the March village elections. Those are coming up, starting on the 22nd, or the 21st. I can't remember the exact date, but it's coming up this week. That the party caucuses are due. So caucus notices for people who want to hold party caucuses, although we haven't had any filed at the Board of Elections for our elections that we run for March, but those are coming due. And then, of course, petitions for those independent nominee petitions are in February. And then we'll find out who the candidates are. And, the Board of Elections runs the village of Minoa, and the village of Manlius is having a 2-fill vacancy election, so that's going on this year. We'll see if there's any opposition to any of those. And then the village of Marcellus is having a election as well. They run that own election. We'll go over more of that. And if you can go back to my village election special that I did a couple weeks ago to talk about that. So we are running on a little late here because I got into this a little late. So that's what's going on at the Board of Elections. So let's talk about Martin Luther King Jr. When we think of the civil rights movement, we often think of the lunch counters and the buses and speeches, but at its core, it was a fight over who gets power. And Martin Luther King Jr. was not just a dreamer, but he was a political realist who understood that voting rights were the backbone of all other civil rights. In fact, one of my favorite quotes of his, he says that the ballot is stronger than the bullet. That was a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. And that underlined, what a lot of his fight was for. It was not just about civil rights, but it was about voting rights, because voting rights is what led and leads to all these other rights. So, without voting, civil rights victories could be ignored or reversed. Voting determines who writes laws, controls police departments, funds schools. King saw voting as protection and not just participation. You used your ballot to protect yourself. In fact, one of his quotes is, "A man without the vote is a man without protection." I think it's important to remember where we were at this time as well. There was so many broken promises after the Civil War, after Reconstruction, that led into the Jim Crow South. The 15th Amendment promised voting rights, but Southern states quickly undermined that. By the mid-20th century, black voting rates in parts of the South were near zero because of the Jim Crow laws. They used tools like literacy tests, poll taxes, grandfather clauses, and violence were used to suppress black voters. Dr. King understood that you needed to stand up for voting rights. You needed to stand up to power. Again, when he was asked, why he was doing this, he would say, a quote that I love, "We are not wrong. We are not wrong in what we are doing." He would couch this in moral right and wrong, that voting rights was about being moral and a moral right and wrong. And, the courts weren't enough. The Supreme Court rulings didn't enforce themselves, and King understood that. He understood real change required direct action. So his philosophy on voting was, was that it was a nonviolent tool that turned moral pressure into political change. In fact, another quote of his: "Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed." That says it all right there. His philosophy was that you cannot just ask for power from those who are holding it back from you. You must demand it. You must demand it from the bottom up, because the top is not going to give it down to you. So they chose a battleground, and that was Selma, Alabama. And Selma, Alabama had a majority black population, but almost no black voters. Local activists there paved the way. Peaceful citizens were arrested simply for just trying to register people to vote. And so Dr. King and many other activists chose Selma, Alabama as the battleground in which to put the civil rights movement in the national spotlight. So they had their march to Montgomery, and the march demanded equal access to the ballot. Not special treatment, but equal access. They wanted, all citizens of the South, but especially black Americans, to get that equal access to the polling places and to registering to vote, because they were being denied that by local law enforcement and local politicians. So peaceful marchers, but then came Bloody Sunday and the Pettit Bridge, where peaceful marchers were crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and Dr. King was among them. And they were met with violence. And this was, where law enforcement sucked dogs on people and, beat peaceful protesters. But Dr. King, another quote, he knew that, and he said, "Unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. So this protest, this bloody protest, this bloody Sunday sorry, that was somebody trying to call me. This bloody Sunday that was televised. It really sent shockwaves through the nation. And it really started to shift public opinion. Nonviolence exposed injustice and forced federal action because citizens throughout the country saw that protesters were being beaten. Protesters were being robbed of their humanity just simply by marching, by simply demanding the rights that other people had. And President Johnson, addressed Congress after Selma, and Dr. King knew that this nonviolent protest and demanding voting rights would be met with force by the oppressors. But he gambled, and I think rightfully gambled, that he would be able to reach those that were ignoring the problem. He said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. He knew that the fight was not a short one. It would be a long one, and that justice would come, but it would take a while. This led to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And during, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 has been under assault over the last several years, actually really over the last 20 years under the Roberts Supreme Court. But at the time, it was a landmark bit of legislation. Literacy tests were banned, and federal oversight of elections finally began in the South. And almost immediately, the black population rose, and the black voting population rose. People were registering to vote. They were participating in the democracy, and black political representation skyrocketed in the South. They were not just participating in vote, but actually being represented as well. And that's why Dr. King, another quote that I love in this, he understood it because he said, "The vote is the foundation stone for political action." So King viewed the act as a major victory. He viewed the Civil Rights Act as a major victory, but warned vigilance was necessary. And in fact, I think we're seeing that now. We've waned a little bit. When Justice Roberts and the conservative majority of the Supreme Court struck down parts of the Voting Rights Act, Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, because Justice Roberts said, "Oh well, racism is gone. It's not out there anymore. It's not as prevalent as it was." So, some of the pre-clearance options that were on the table, the court took away. Justice Ginsburg said that just because it's raining, I don't put away my umbrella, or just because it's not raining, I don't throw away my umbrella, or something. I'm butchering that a little bit, but this was in what Dr. King was talking about, that the vigilance needed to continue, that it needed to. I'm going to have to turn on some lights now because I am losing some light here. So vigilance needed to continue beyond just the passage of the Civil Voting Rights Act. And, obviously, he knew that just the Civil Voting Rights Act was not enough as well. It needed to continue to expand the vote, continue to make it easier for people to vote. And, he said injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That meant any group, not just African Americans, but any group that is not getting justice and not getting powers to the polls would, and representation and the ability to vote could be a threat for every group, because if it can be done to one, it can be done to all. And he understood that peaceful demonstration wasn't non-confrontational. You can be nonviolent, but also confrontational, and he was, and his movement was, and it demanded rights, and it did not back down from what was right, and pushing and continue to push. And they did have this major victory, and that is why I'm going to end with one of my favorite quotes of Dr. King was, the time is always right to do what is right. So, obviously I'm a voting rights professional, and voting rights is a major cause in my life. Dr. King meant so much for so many, way more than voting rights for many people, about equality, about nonviolence, about treating African Americans like full citizens, and all of that is something that is important too. But I also believe that voting rights is the fundamental way that we can empower people to make those changes that are so incredibly needed and still needed in our country. So that's why Martin Luther King, who gave his life for the cause that, he cared so deeply about, I admired him so much. I'm so glad we have this day. It was not always this way. It's horrible that there's been some backtracking on this day. The National Park Services under Donald Trump no longer get free admission on MLK Day for some reason. It was like not a financial burden. That's not what happened. This was a targeted to try to lessen his memory, and it's wrong. So I wanted to devote this commissioner in card to some of my favorite quotes of his, the ones that I view dearly, and I hope that I did his memory partial justice. I'm not a historian. I'm not a professional speaker. I put together these quotes because I knew them and I wanted them to have them. I wanted to talk about the Voting Rights Act, but I'm sure I left large segments out. So I urge you, if you're unfamiliar with Dr. King's work, because it's been a while since you read about him in school, or maybe his memory has faded a little bit. I hope that you will go out and learn about his fight and honor his fight by fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. And it's something that I think we need in the coming years. All right, so looking ahead, work continues to prepare for the March elections and petition passing at the Board of Elections. My weekly walk last week, I did part 3 of my look at Onondaga County. I did the city of Syracuse. Expect this Thursday I will be doing my part 4 of our look at Onondaga County going to 2026, and that's the county legislature, an overview there. So last week, my trivia question was, what is the smallest town in Onondaga County by active voters? And the answer to that is the town of Fabius. As of today, only 1,465 voters in the town of Fabius. And how small is that? Well, it's actually smaller, obviously smaller than every other town, but the city of Syracuse has 19 wards inside the city of Syracuse. These are the tracts of land as they were added to the city. There are various sizes, but 17 of those 19 wards are actually bigger than the town of Fabius in terms of voter population. Now, the town of Fabius is an agricultural region. There's a lot of land devoted to agriculture, which is very important as well. But I think it's important that when we look at land and we look at these maps that I've been putting out there, how land doesn't mean a lot of voters sometimes, and I think that was something that I wanted to put out there. So next week's trivia question, and again, a lot of these trivia questions you're going to find the answer to in the weekly walks, but next week's trivia question will be on back to age. I want you to guess. We have 17 county legislature districts. I would like you to guess which one is the youngest and which one is the oldest. Again, if you look at and read the weekly walk this week, you're going to get a little bit of that. But I also hope that you will watch, or maybe make a guess and watch next week to get the answer. So, and my next commissioner car will focus on how vacancies are filled. I was going to do that this week, but I decided to do Martin Luther King. But also, there's still a lot of things up the air, especially with the Syracuse Commissioner of Education that has been in the news. I'm going to go to the hearing tomorrow because I want to be informed, not just as a elections commissioner, but as a city voter and a parent of a city school kid, a parent of two city school kids, and a product of city schools myself. So I'm going to go to watch and be informed at 4:30 tomorrow at Nottingham High School, and go from there. So that's all I have today. As always, you can subscribe to DustinZarney.com, or you can and you'll get an email every time I post content, or follow me along on any of my social medias. I'm on everything. Just look for Dustin Zarney and you're going to find it, and you'll see the content and election news that I post. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. King, for your service to our nation and to our people and to all people. And I hope I did you a little bit of justice today. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.